Alrighty, so ladles, jelly spoons, baby bells, and gemstones. After absolute months of reporting and discussing on the subject of Mr. Slater's death, it's finally all come to a head today with the inquest into his death finally being delivered today, or yesterday as it is now. But the reality is, like, do we follow the same narrative that they're all following? Brittany, hello, darling. Because personally speaking, after hearing, like, the coroner deliver their verdict, and with everything that's been online, in the papers, etc., can we really believe the coroner's verdict and take it as gospel truth and be like, yep, that sounds feasible, that's clearly how it happened? Because I don't. And the annoying thing is, anybody who's in the mainstream media or in the police or whatever else, or any detectives or anyone else has been looking into this case, they don't listen to the stuff that content creators are making, or the stuff that content creators are looking into, or the investigation and stuff that we've all done, the research that we've all done, the questions that we've been raising. They won't take us into consideration. And do you know why they won't do that? Because they simply consider us as just being like front room detectives. No. We actually have the abilities, the communities, and the standing to speak to our followers, our subscribers, our viewers, and be like, what do you think about this situation? How do you find this situation? And you guys talk to us. You tell us what you were thinking. And you raise really, really decent questions for us to talk about. There's a new online safety check for certain websites. You need ID. Yeah. Grindr being one of them. It's mad. But honestly, like, I'm not sure if you've seen the news today, Brittany, but the coroner into Jay Slaters Death has delivered his verdict. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think it's going to bring his family any closure. I don't think it's going to bring his family anywhere near the closure and support that they were looking for. Because there's been so many lies being spread from his so-called friends. The guy who also hired the B&B, good old IAB. Honestly, I'm not buying it. And here's one of the reasons I'm not buying that narrative, okay? Now, as we have discussed in previous episodes of this show, right? The ravine that Jay Slater allegedly fell down, right? And the surrounding area around that ravine has literally been investigated and searched for days and weeks following his disappearance, right? And weirdly, there was no sign of him at all. And then miraculously, out of absolutely bag shit nowhere, he's found with his belongings and stuff. Now, nothing says setup more than suddenly a body appearing in the exact location his phone pinged him off to be, and then suddenly there he is, right? Now, yes, okay, they're saying that the injuries he sustained show a fall from height, etc., and that's what killed him, and apparently it was an accidental death. But if it's accidental and he fell and was there for the 29 days, right? Now, I'm no pathologist, okay? I'm no doctor. I'm no medical professional. But for a body to be out in the heat that would be in Tenerife, going through the extremes of temperatures from the daytime to the nighttime consistently for 29 days, that does things to a body. Like, a body would most definitely decompose to the point where certain identification, for example, fingertips and fingerprints, probably wouldn't be that recognizable, right? Now, apparently he was identified by his fingerprints, yeah? If a body's left in the wilderness for that length of time, there wouldn't be much of a body left, right? For example, I know it's completely different. Look at an animal, yeah? So like a deer, a badger, a fox, even a hedgehog, yeah? If they get run over and squashed on the road, like, animals go and eat them. And there's very, very quickly not much of a body left in a very short space of time. Normally like a day or two, 3 or 4 at a push, yeah? Before other creatures go and eat on that, right? So if a body was left, a human body was left in the wilderness for 29 days, there would not be much of a body left. So the fact that there was a body there in the first place that could have been recovered, identifiable, and then repatriated back to the UK, personally speaking, that wasn't there for 29 days. And I agree. I think someone did push him, but I think he was battered the absolute crap out of prior to being pushed down that ravine. And I think he was done head first. And I think it was done on the night of the football. Because DTR, yeah, down the Rapids, stated that during the football final, animals were going crazy in that area. Alex, welcome back to the channel. Animals were going mad. And yet, weirdly, out of nowhere, they find his body. So, genuinely think there's some foul play. Hi, AD, how you doing, man? Now, like I said, I am no pathological expert. Why do I have a crown? Because you are top fan number 2, apparently, mate. But genuinely, he was battered, I reckon. Absolutely beat the shit out of. And then thrown. Disposed of. Chucked away. So I'm not going to buy this coroner's report of accidental death. I really hope and pray that his family take it higher. God knows they've got the money to pay for it because of all the GoFundMe money. But there's no way on this earth he died accidentally falling down a ravine. Like, I'm not buying that at all. And as soon as the reports started coming through that was the narrative people were going with, I was like, nah. Because also, I don't know how much of the Inquest you guys have actually watched online or on news platforms or whatever, right? But it was very, very weird to see, like, Brandon, who was supposed to be Jay Slater's best friend, suddenly being all pally with Iab. Yeah, the guy who actually booked the B&B. Yeah, the Airbnb that they went to the night before he died. And the amount of hypocrisy, the amount of U-turns, and the amount of so-called new information. And it's just like, what's going on? Where has this new information come from? Why have you suddenly changed the narrative that was being portrayed weeks before? And again, weirdly, Brad was very, very quiet about a lot of the information that he gave out. That's nice for you, Adi. How have you got that? If you could try and stay on topic tonight, that'd be quite helpful, guys. Thank you. But it's just very, very weird. And I don't get it. Also, if you guys can press the like button as well to try and get the more viewers, that'd be amazing. I know it's a Friday night, but let's see what we can do. So Brittany, I think it's interesting you reckon you said you think it was pushed. Frankly, so do I. I believe that narrative. And with all the evidence and stuff pointing towards that sort of thing, I don't know how they could turn around and say that it was accidental rather than foul play. It literally makes no sense to me. It makes no sense at all. Because who accidentally just falls down a ravine? You know, like, I'm not being funny. He was out there for his very first holiday abroad on his own. And then suddenly, doesn't come back? Just seems really weird. But what do you guys think? Because at the end of the day, like, it's all very well and good me giving my opinion and saying, like, I reckon this happened, etc., etc., etc. But what do you guys reckon? Do you think it was accidental? Do you follow what the coroner was saying? Or do you think this has been the biggest cover-up to ever happen? Because, frankly, I don't think justice has been served to his family. I don't even think justice has been served to Jay, to be completely frank with you. And yeah, granted, I didn't know the guy. But for a 19-year-old to go on his first ever holiday abroad and end up dead, like, I don't like those odds. You know, that could be a member of our family next. You know, it could be a member of my family, a member of your family. It could be someone that you know or a neighbour or something. They could go on their first holiday abroad and not come home either. Like, what? You know, we all know that these drug cartels and stuff exist. That's very obvious by the narrative that has been very prevalent the whole way through this whole story. But at the same time, the fact of the matter is somebody died. Yeah, I mean, even then, like, you're going to probably one of the most remotest points of Tenerife, and yet apparently there was a woman there that spoke English. Really? What, well enough to be able to turn around and say what's going on? I don't know anything about this situation, so I'm just going to listen to you talk about it. But that's absolutely fine, Alex. Don't worry, it's fine. Like, but I'm guessing you probably have heard about this story at some point, because this whole Jay Slaters Death thing has just been all over every news platform going, every social media platform going for well over the last year. And this is the thing, it's been a year since Jay Slater went missing. been a year since that random song suddenly appeared on Spotify called Jay Slater. And it's just like, what? Yeah, it wasn't middle of nowhere. In Mascot, whatever the place was called. And it's just like, it's just really bizarre. For starters, why would anyone who was possibly drunk or off their head on drugs, etc., why would you, as friends, allow that person to go off on their own to this Airbnb with someone they've only just met, although Brandon reckons they're like best mates, etc., and covering up all this stuff and then all the dodgy dealings and stuff that Iab has got himself into? Why would you allow your friend to go and do that? Why would you literally allow someone who you know is not in the best physical state to go with that person? When theoretically, it is safer and better for that person to go with you guys back to your hotel where it's safe, where he'll find his money, his charger, he'll have access to his passport, etc., and he'll be safe. Like, surely going back to a hotel is a lot safer than going to an Airbnb with someone he didn't know. And clearly something happened in that Airbnb whereby if we follow the narrative and we follow the bullshit story that's been given out, clearly something happened there to make him feel that unsafe that he felt he had no choice but to leave. And therefore try and make his own way back on that so-called 9-hour walk back to the middle of Tenerife to the hotel where he should have been staying. And the fact that he then messaged his friends saying, like, my phone's on 1%, like, help, I need help. And none of them found a way to go and pick him up. Because they're friends you want, aren't they? Like, sorry, what? If I was in that sort of situation and I messaged the people or put something on my Snapchat and was like, guys, I need help, and no one turned up, I would be like, what's going on? Like, you call yourself friends, and when I really need you, you know where to be sat, you know to be found. I would no longer class them people as friends. And I'm pretty sure if Jay was still alive, there'd be a lot of questions to be asked by them, be answered by them people. I don't watch the news, and his situation has shown up on my FYPs. Mate, you're lucky then. Because even this channel, this very channel you're watching right now, has published multiple things now on Jay Slater. And obviously, this is now probably the final one, as the inquest has been passed today as to the reason apparently why he died. But again, I'm not buying it, because their narrative just does not add up in any way, shape, or form. It just doesn't make sense. Doesn't ring true. And physically does not seem possible. I also find it really bizarre how his dad, his brother, the emergency services in Tenerife, his so-called friends, and God knows how many people from the UK, whether they're actually like search and rescue teams, search and rescue actual like professionals, like Down the Rapids, the YouTuber, and yet none of them found him. And then suddenly, when this so-called like special team comes in from the Netherlands, literally before they even get set foot into the so-called search area, suddenly the Tenerife police and the Tenerife search and rescue teams discover this body. If that doesn't scream cover up and corruption to the highest level, I don't know what does, ladies and gents. Because I'm not being funny. For them to suddenly find this body in the area that has been searched multiple times, right, by loads of different people, right, and then suddenly they then find him in that exact location, like literally a couple of meters away from his phone's pinged location, with his phone as well, may I add, which bizarrely wasn't that damaged, and yet he died from a fall from height. Well, that phone should be smashed within an inch of its life, but by all accounts, that wasn't the case. It was still in a usable condition. What, falling 600 feet? I don't think so. And for them to suddenly find him and be able to recover him without using any specialist equipment or teams, I'm also not buying that it was that inaccessible that people wouldn't have found him. But also, right, birds, yeah? Flappy little birds have an incredible way of finding shiny objects, right? If you've got a phone screen and like the odd little bit of change or something or loads, anything that's shiny, any form of jewelry, etc., shining in the midday sun, those birds would have discovered it. And then would obviously find a lifeless body. Well, that's a food source. So they would start pecking the crap out of that body. So then there'd be open wounds, etc. Well, we all know what happens with open wounds and like bodies and stuff. That's where maggots and stuff come into it. Maggots and those sort of things don't take that long to eat a body. So if it really was there decomposing for 29 days, there would not be any way to identify him, ladies and gents. So how can we follow this narrative? How can we follow this absolute strange idea that Jay Slater was left in the wilderness, in the open air, for 29 days? Like, I could go and lay in a field right now for 29 days with no food, no water, etc. Yeah. Obviously, after a couple of days, yeah, okay, you'd end up dead. And I guarantee you, 29 days later, there wouldn't be much of my body left. There certainly would not be fingerprints, but they could go and do a fingerprint analysis and be like, it's that person. So I feel for his family. Specifically his dad and his brother, who actually did go out and look for him, right? Because the coroner's verdict makes no sense. It doesn't ring true in any way, shape, or form. Like, it just seems really odd that a coroner who would have done God knows how many of these inquests before would deliver a verdict of accidental death. Look for the evidence. Listen to the initial interviews that Bradley, Brandon, Lucy all gave to authorities and papers and stuff right back to a year ago, compared to the same evidence that they have given at this inquest. Because a lot of it just didn't add up. How they'd turn around and say, oh yeah, he was perfectly fine when he left the nightclub. He was perfectly fine when he went off to like the Airbnb, etc. There was no cause for concern. The guy was off his face on God knows what illicit substances and drugs. But that doesn't cause concern amongst you guys, no? So, personally, I don't buy it at all. I think someone somewhere has just done him so dirty. Either that, or somehow someone has been that convincing during that entire inquest trial that they're left with no choice. But if I was his family, I'd be taking it higher. I'd be like, nah, I'm not buying that. Maybe they won't because they were looking for closure and now they've got it. I don't know. But it doesn't make sense. It really does not make sense. And the fact that so many content creators, some of whom have like literally named their channel just investigating so much stuff to do with Jay Slater, like, what are they going to do now? Like, the amount of content creators that have made an absolute killing from the views and stuff on their videos, whether it be on TikTok, whether it be on YouTube, whether it be on Instagram or wherever, like, and I don't begrudge them for doing it, but because they've actually been looking into stuff properly, researching everything and not leaving any stone unturned. And yet, evidence and stuff that they have been able to like bring to light, or questions that they've asked to people like Iab or Brandon or Bradley or Lucy, etc. And yet their evidence and stuff isn't used because content creators are not seen as qualified investigators. They're just seen as someone that just sits at home and nothing better to do with their time than look into stuff. Well, the fact that people have got the time to look into that sort of thing and look into it with literally a fine tooth comb to make sure that no stones are left unturned, surely should be enough for people to go, actually, maybe we should look at some of the things they've been talking about. That's the whole point of having all these different people that look into stuff. Because at the end of the day, that's why people make content. They make content to ask the questions that don't make sense. Like, I would love to find out from a doctor or any medical professional how a body can stay in sweltering heat during the daytime, freezing cold temperatures at night time, which, okay, granted, the cold temperatures at night time may preserve a body, right? Obviously, we know that happens anyway, because when a person dies in normal circumstances, they are frozen until they're buried or cremated, right? To preserve the body as much as humanly possible. Cool. That makes complete sense. But for a body to be freezing, then thawing, freezing and thawing, freezing and thawing for 29 days is also going to do a hell of a lot of damage to that body. So, again, how does that ring true? How is that even possible that that sort of situation even happens? Because it doesn't make any sense. So I'll be interested to know what you guys think, because genuinely someone somewhere knows a lot more about that situation than they're prepared to let on. And for some reason, Lucy, Brandon and Brad were all very happy to literally or metaphorically lick Iab's ass and make out that he was this wonderful person who looks after Jay right up until his final hours. Saying he was the best, you know, he was their best friend and he looked out for him, did all this stuff, blah, 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 blah. What? Like, you don't, there's three of them. The three of them knew at that point when they were saying all this sort of malarkey at the inquest. They knew they were chatting out their ass and they were chatting absolute pig shit. And yet, weirdly, they all went along with it. So therefore, what hold does IAB have over those three? Like, what threats did he make to them? To say, look, if you don't follow this story, this is going to happen to you. Like, what blackmail was used? Because the three of them surely cannot believe in a month of Sundays that he died accidentally. That is not possible. That is not believable. It's not logical. And it sure as hell is not. It's just not believable. Literally, it's so unbelievable. And yet, an actual coroner somehow believed all of their testimonies, all of their statements, into saying that, yep, he died accidentally and was just mysteriously found in the exact location that had been searched over and over and over and over. Don't believe it. I'm not buying it. And if I was his family, I wouldn't find any justice in that. I wouldn't find any closure. And I sure as hell wouldn't be sat there going, there you go, my son died through accidental death and accidental causes. Have a day off. Have a word with yourself, or give your head a wobble. Because if you genuinely believe that's what's happened, if you genuinely believe that, like, there's no foul play involved, you literally need to give your head a massive, massive wobble. Because I'm sorry, but I'm just a small-time YouTuber and a small-time content creator whose opinion really doesn't matter. But so many unanswered questions. Like, why did his friends let him go off by himself? Why didn't at least one of them go with him? You know, or what the fuck? Why did none of them go to his help and his aid when he sent his location saying, help, I'm in the shit, like, I need to get back from here and it's like a 9-hour walk? Why did none of them go, okay, well, stay where you are, we'll be there in like 15, 20 minutes? Just how long the drive was. Like, he could have just sat at the side of the road and waited. It would not have been difficult. Why did the woman up in Mascot, who we asked about the bus times and stuff, why did she say, well, it's however long till the bus turns up, but actually, come and take a seat, come and sit in my cafe for a bit, have a drink or whatever, charge your phone until the bus turns up? Why didn't she just take him by the hand and, like, guide him, look after him? Why did none of the search and rescue teams that searched that area for the whole 29 days of his disappearance, why did none of them find him? Why weren't the team from the Netherlands allowed anywhere near that search site from like 7 a.m. when they got there, prepared to get going? Why were they held back until 11 o'clock in the morning when that body was discovered mysteriously by the Tenerife police, who said they weren't going to be involved anymore, and then suddenly went back there and found the body? Why? A body that was still identifiable. Come on. That's what I mean. This inquest has literally raised more questions than it's answered, because none of it makes sense. And I get the fact that obviously, like, the police out there are very good at covering stuff up. They're very good at not giving away information, or things can be lost in translation, etc. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to just be like, well, none of this adds up. And no one can be that naive to think, well, look, these three are all saying the same thing. Like, for all three people to be giving the same narrative, you can't suddenly tell me that's believable. Like, is it? Really? I'm not being funny. If I was a judge and three different people all gave almost identical accounts to each other on a certain crime with absolutely no variant at all, I'd be like, either someone's paying you or you know something and you are just prepared to cover it up. Why would you do that? Why would you do that to your so-called friend who's died in the most horrific, horrendous, and nasty situations? Ladies and gents, there are so many more videos and stuff that could be done regarding Jay Slater. But as things right now stand, like, there really is no point. Because of that narrative, because of that verdict that's been given by the coroner today, there really is no point drudging deeper, looking deeper to try and find out or do any more videos about Jay, right? Because quite frankly, we're going to go over old turf now. Unless his family do try and take it further and investigate it better and find someone that actually wants to look into everything regarding his disappearance, rather than just listening to the absolute bare bullshit minimum and take it as like, yep, accidental. Why? What? I am baffled. Baffled to learn that any coroner in the country, especially in this country, where we are switched on, where we do investigate things, where we do research things properly, how can a coroner literally turn around and be like, "Yep, I'm going to follow the narrative and say it was an accidental death. He fell." Rather than looking at everything. You know, these friends that are so concerned about him and all this sort of stuff and making out that they were concerned during this inquest. And yet, they weren't concerned about him when he actually went missing. They didn't seem to care then. Just left him to it. Cool. All right, mate. We know where you are. We'll see when you get back, sort of thing. Go and help him. Assist him. At least go pick him up. But guess what? There's no point in them going to pick him up, was there? There's no point in them going up there to go and help him. Why? Because they knew he weren't there. Right? I think you'll find that actually somebody went to that kind of location, stood there, sent a snap saying, "This is my location, help." People already knew. There's no point going there. We know he's dead. We know he's been done over. Whether that was done by IAB himself or somebody else who was at that villa that we don't know about. Nobody really knows who was actually there waiting for when they all got back. How do we know there wasn't some like dealer waiting there for him to absolutely obliterate him by the time they got back to that Airbnb? Because to me, that sounds believable. That sounds believable, and that sounds actually quite a plausible situation. But it still makes no sense. Because again, for his friends to have known that he was already dead before he even got to that Airbnb, Someone somewhere knew something, and yet still they waited for God knows how long before raising the alarm to say that he'd gone missing. And yet, bizarrely, the coroner doesn't find that weird. Well, I do. Because I'm not being funny. If I went missing, right, and my friends waited for hours to report me as missing, despite me like messaging them and saying, I need help, I'm on 1% battery, I've got no food, no water, like, I need you guys. And for no one to come to my rescue, I'll be looking for new friends. Because I wouldn't class my friends as friends to just leave me miles and miles and miles away from home. Right? And the point is proven even deeper, ladies and gents, right? Because some of you may remember on our Christmas specials back on Christmas Eve last year, right? Whereby, to begin with, we were slating the Christmas tree in Trafalgar Square, so it's awful. And then you came with me across London to the train station, where we then discovered there were no trains. So I was therefore stranded in London until like Boxing Day. Even then, a friend of mine was like, no way are you staying in London for that length of time on your own. Like, I'm not going to leave you in London on your own. That's not happening. And drove from like his house an hour and a half into London, picked me up and brought me home. Because he was not prepared to leave me in London for that length of time. And that's a friend I've only known, like, by that point, I'd only known him 3 months. Hadn't known him that long at all. But still did that. So if a friend that's known someone for that length of time can do that, where were Jay's friends who'd known him all through school for years, grown up with him, and yet the time that he really needed their help were nowhere to be seen? How can people do that? Knowing their friends in danger or potentially already dead, and yet not be hysterical about it and just deal with it, move on from it. Like, what? Even now, yeah? If I was to suddenly drop dead tonight, and my friends are just like, oh, well, okay, cool, he's gone. What? Call yourself friends. It's like, what the fuck? What is actually wrong with you? How can you just be that blasé and be like, oh yeah, cool, that's no issue, fine, okay. You what? No. So yeah, okay. Content creators like myself, wax unfiltered, and then like who has gone into this case and again himself left no stone unturned, has done hours upon hours upon hours of research into this case to try himself and find justice for Jay Slater. Even he was saying this afternoon, the narrative just doesn't work. Like, doesn't ring true in any way, shape, or form. And I'm completely with him because it doesn't make any sense. It does not make sense at all, ladies and gents. It's laughable. Completely and utterly laughable if it wasn't so tragic. And I'm horrified at today's verdict. I'm horrified that a coroner has just overlooked all of the anomalies, all of the indiscretions, all of the hypocrisy, and delivered an accidental death verdict. Like, no. Have a word with yourself, right? There's a 19-year-old boy who lost his life so needlessly, and personally speaking, I don't think that's fair. I mean, look, just take a look at him, right? I personally feel it is so wrong for that verdict to have been given as accidental death. And I just think that because of that, there is just so much injustice. There is so much hypocrisy. And it just doesn't make any sense. It's not right. It's not fair. And my heart goes out to the guy. Now, I don't know about you, but I genuinely think it is worthwhile to give this guy a minute's silence. And I reckon let's start now. So, if I was Jay Slater and was overwatching those inquest hearings, listening to my friends talking about stuff which either was partially or completely made up, I'd be raging. Because, of course, the only person who really knows the truth of what really happened to him is him. Because he was there by himself in those final hours of his life. And he was probably quite happy to have all of these people who he didn't know creating content about him, trying to find the answers, doing the job of the police for them to get those answers to make sure that he got justice. Let's face it, a year ago, to like every Tom, Dick, and Harry normally like across the country, the name Jay Slater didn't really mean anything. Like, he was just nobody, to be completely frank. We didn't know who he was until that news story broke of this 19-year-old who just suddenly vanished into nowhere. Then we all knew who he was. But let's face it, by the point of him going missing, it was already too late. Because by that point, as we all know, as soon as the news hits Britain that someone's gone missing, there is no coming back. Because anyone who's anyone just reaches the conclusion they've passed. Because 98 times out of 100, that's how it goes. Look, Madeleine McCann, Nicola Bulley, Jay Slater. Yeah, that's 3. That's without even doing any research. They're just ones off the top of my head. Oh, what? Well, obviously, Madeleine McCann never turns up again. Nicola Bulley turns up dead again in a river which had been searched high and low over and over and over and over again, and then suddenly she appears in the same place. So unless these people have been beamed up by aliens, held for a couple of weeks, and then just dropped off at the same location, I don't know. But it all seems really weird. I'm not going to lie to you. Because ordinarily, when a person dies, their whole body doesn't just disappear. And yet, it's happening over and over and over and over and over again. So, the coroner may have given an accidental death verdict for Jay Slater. I'm not buying it in any way, shape, or form. I really do not think for a second that that's how he died. And I think there's a lot of people across the country and indeed across the world who, again, are not going to buy that narrative. But, folks, let me know your thoughts and opinions, because I'm not buying it in any way, shape, or form. This was obviously going to be a short video regarding the verdict anyway. We will be back tonight with The Grind episode 9. But until then, this has been LindenTV. Miss it, miss out.